Chaplaincy. I wonder where your mind goes to when you hear that word. Perhaps you think concretely of the person of a chaplain and the kind of things that they might do within a particular context. On their own, as part of a team, employed or in a voluntary capacity, sometimes with, sometimes without the title of chaplain. Or perhaps you think more abstractly of chaplaincy as an area of ministry, something that happens more implicitly, that a variety of people can be involved in, often without even realising that chaplaincy is what they are doing. During this session today, we want to help put some language, structure and intentionality around this idea of chaplaincy, to help us to think about it more deeply and to dream about it in terms of what it can mean for chaplaincy in schools. Some say that the origins of chaplaincy can be found in the story of St. Martin of Tours, a young military soldier who tore his cloak in two to provide clothing for a naked beggar who later appeared to him as the figure of Christ. Latin scholars among you will know that the old word for cloak is where the word chaplain is derived from. Nowadays, of course, the word chaplain is used to describe anyone who represents a particular religious tradition in an institution. So in the military, in hospitals, in schools and in universities. No matter what the context, the essence remains the same. To be there alongside others in the name of Jesus with a generosity of spirit that seeks to meet the needs of those around us. I picked that phrase up from an article I read and I found that every word is loaded with meaning when it comes to thinking about what chaplaincy does or could look like in schools. To be there, it's someone who is willing to show up no matter what. Alongside, so this needs to be done in relationship with the school in the context we're thinking about, with teachers, with pupils, with other churches, organisations or individuals. In the name of Jesus. As Christians, of course, we're there to bring the distinctiveness of our Christian faith, the distinctiveness of Jesus and his good news into this context. Generosity. Generosity takes time and it takes effort and it takes sacrifice and it will often be messy. The needs in schools are great, both in a big picture and on an individual level. And since this context is changing all the time, so are the needs of those around us. This is something that should be for everyone in a school community. And there are some great examples of this already going on in many of our schools, and increasingly more a recognition of the need for it. Perhaps now more than ever, as the needs of our schools are so vast, and the children and young people and staff who make up our school communities need our support as churches, church leaders, organisations, or as individuals. When I visited a chaplaincy space in a school in England last year, I saw the words of Jesus from John 10:10 fixed on the wall, alongside a set of Gideon's Bibles and a Pudsey bear, which for me helped to sum up part of the role of a chaplain in that school. At a time when there is so much uncertainty, fear and anxiety in the world, these words are very much on our minds for the children and young people we seek to share God's generous heart with. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full, or have it abundantly. Jesus came, he showed up, and he comes alongside, desiring for people to know and show the fullness of relationship that he offers through his name and through his generous sacrifice. He knows our needs and the needs of our schools all too well, and he calls us to join with him in serving those around us with his message as our motivation. Wouldn't it be great if all our schools had those words of Jesus on their walls? There are four main threads of chaplaincy that we're going to think about today. There's the pastoral thread, the spiritual thread, the educational thread, and the thread of witness. Now, each of these can work alone, but obviously each can also intertwine and complement each other to create something that's really strong and powerful and beautiful. We're going to think about each of these threads individually and look at some examples along the way. Let's begin by thinking through the pastoral thread. Perhaps now more than ever, pastoral care is so important for children and young people in school. Every school seeks to fulfil a requirement to support the social and emotional well-being of both pupils and teachers. And this is something reflected throughout their structures, their ethos and their policies. But with the ever-increasing workload in teachers and the upward trajectory of mental health problems in particular, research shows that there is a need for more support in this area, both for pupils and for teachers. So what can this thread of chaplaincy in schools look like? Well, as we've watched and listened, we've heard 3 words being repeated again and again. Time. Simply showing up and being there for young people or teachers is hugely beneficial and demonstrates how valued every member of the school community is. Offering dedicated time, either one-to-one or within a small group, with a trusted, caring adult to listen and talk through the issues or situations they are facing can help children and young people to work towards positive outcomes and to develop healthy relationships. Working alongside the existing pastoral care model of the school and things like counselling or mentoring programs that might already be in place, this can add another dimension to the pastoral care structure and deals with issues in a more informal, early intervention basis, introducing a level of pastoral support that fills the gap between teacher and professional support. Presence. Having a physical presence in the school as more than just a visitor, but rather as an available part of the community, part of the fabric of the school, as someone once put it to me, can be really helpful in terms of ongoing pastoral care. This could be as simple as being in the staff room with teachers at break or lunchtime, or with pupils in the playground, helping out in school trips, or simply just being willing to serve in practical ways as needed. Some of the things that we often talk about in terms of the empowering part of our E3 Schools project. But this is also about carrying a prayerful, spiritual presence into these opportunities as well. Discerning the presence of God, where He is at work, and what part He would have us to play in that. It's about being ready to bring Christian love and insight into everyday situations in context-appropriate ways. And at a time, particularly now, when we can't be in schools so much physically, often informed prayer for schools is a really effective way into that. Relationship. It perhaps goes without saying that building relationships are key in this, and that takes time, regularity and consistency of personnel. Chaplains on the ground would often say that it was only once solid relationships are formed that the needs of the school and how a chaplain could help to meet them were solidified. So the relationship element means that the whole process is organic and requires us to find the balance between flexibility as well as defined structures or parameters of chaplaincy. There are some great organisations out there that can help schools with pastoral support and some great resources available too, like the Shaken resource from our friends at Big House.
Our Shaken online has just finished, but now is your chance to go even deeper with our Shaken book. This book has been especially created for young people to work through individually or as a group, and it is packed full of 20 healthy coping mechanisms designed to help you live well when life feels difficult. And in the Big House, we know that we can all feel like dice and get shaken up when life is tricky. But thankfully, we have more control over how we will land than these dice do. So Shaken has been designed to help young people to make good choices to live well when life shakes. It's a book and it's a game. Roll the 20-sided dice and the number that it lands in is the coping mechanism that you can try out. Give it a score out of 10 and decide if it's something that you would like to try when life is difficult. We are each uniquely known and loved by God, and there will be a way for each of us to uniquely cope with our difficult days. So pre-order Shaken today for you, your friends and your group.
A great resource to check out there, and it links us really well into our next thread, the spiritual thread. Now obviously education is holistic and schools are professional educational environments, and we often say that as churches, as Christian organisations or as individuals, one of the reasons we're there is to help schools meet the needs of the curriculum, perhaps particularly in terms of RE and collective worship. But we're also there to support the spiritual awareness and development of children and young people, which of course we believe is just as important as their physical, mental, intellectual, social and emotional development as they learn how to live in the world and find their place in it. So again, as we've listened, we've heard some key words coming up time and again in this thread of chaplaincy as well. Space. In some cases, this might be a dedicated physical space that will help pupils explore faith in a way that is inclusive, safe and respectful. It could be a space for young people to hang out at lunchtime, a space to have one-to-ones, or just somewhere to be quiet in the midst of the busyness of school life, or have some time out, particularly those with anxiety or special educational needs. So this could be a space designed to allow for questions and conversations of faith, but it also intertwines with the thread of pastoral care provision. In a more abstract sense though, it also means space in terms of headspace. It needs to be a safe space, a space to be heard, a space to be shown value, a welcoming space which everyone who is part of the school community will feel welcomed into, no matter what their background. Ethos. Many schools will have some sort of ethos statement or a collection of positive values or words that help to sum up the kind of environment they want to have within their community. We can play a key role in speaking into, communicating and modelling these key values of the school community so that things like honesty and respect, for example, become more than just words to aspire to, but actual values that can be lived out in corridors and classrooms in really intentional ways. Chaplains can model how such values are rooted in the Bible and ultimately how they can help to nurture the life of the school. I've seen some schools where the key values or ethos statements are displayed for all to see throughout the school. Maybe they focus on one at a time in assemblies, and often examples of them in action are intentionally sought for and rewarded. And key moments. Key moments for spiritual teaching most commonly include assemblies and celebrations to help meet the needs of collective worship in the school, particularly around seasonal gatherings, in a biblical, respectful and inclusive way. But it may also be about spiritual guidance and support in the difficult moments of school life, in cases of bereavement within the school community, for example, where support is needed for principals and teachers as much as for pupils. So in summing this spiritual thread up, you are someone who has the time and headspace to reflect on the lives of young people and of the school, and to spot opportunities for spiritual development in all sorts of places. There is so much in the pastoral care thread that links with the spiritual thread, carrying the presence of God, showing compassion and the love of God, and taking opportunities to talk about and share personal faith as appropriate to the context. And we see that particularly in the story of how a local church in Bangor worked alongside their local Scripture Union E3 worker to bring a prayer space into the primary school on their doorstep.
Okay, so I'm delighted to be online here with Rachel Tweedy, who is our Scripture Union E3 schools worker for North Down and Newton Arts, and also with Reverend Mark Johnson, who is the minister of St Andrew's Presbyterian Church in Bangor. So thank you so much to both of you for joining me for a wee online chat today. Maybe just to get us going, so tell us, first of all, how this opportunity for a prayer space in your local primary school, how did that come about? And maybe why were you both so keen to make it happen?
Yeah, so the church building of St Andrews, Leanne, is right beside Candyboy Primary School, and for the last 70 years of the life of the church family, we've had a close link with the school. So even to this day, there's lots of opportunities to have early birds breakfast clubs every Tuesday morning. We're there regularly in assemblies, sharing with the kids and the staff. There's a school gate ministry that happens day by day, and there's some members from the church family that are in the governors. And so there's a deepening relationship with the school and the church family, which we really love. But a couple of years ago then, a couple of the staff members that are involved in coordinating the RE curriculum approached us to see, look, are there any other creative ways in which we can engage the young folks in each of the classes with the RE curriculum and anything that we can help with in lessons. And it was at that point, I guess, that I turned to Rachel to see what we could do. We just felt as a church family this was a great opportunity, that the school was asking us to get involved in something like this, and we really wanted to try and keep engaged with staff and the pupils and encourage the church family to get plugged into this vital ministry as well.
Yeah, so we had already been in to do lessons together in the school, and so it provided a great opportunity to work together on things. And I had just heard about prayer spaces in schools from their local worker here, Emma Thompson, and what that was all about. And so I was really excited actually when the school approached Mark that there was just an openness to maybe try something new. And so we floated the idea of prayer space, and they were really keen for that to happen. And so I went away and I wrote a little introductory lesson, a little introductory activity. It just launched from there. And so we offered it and they accepted it. And now it's been something that's happened for the past 3 years and is a regular part of their school rhythm and school life.
That's just so brilliant to hear that has just become a part of their rhythm. But I'm aware that some people watching this, they might not really know what a prayer space in a school particularly looks like. So could you tell us a little bit about what that looked like in practice? It's not like any other ordinary RE lesson. So what did it look like for you guys?
Yeah, so prayer spaces can take place in the school, but we chose to take place in the church hall. And so the pupils came in, we did an introductory lesson just teaching about prayer and what prayer is. And then we took the children downstairs into a little room downstairs that had been created with lots of resources that were free and available online from the Prayer Spaces in Schools website. So there's a great place to start if you are looking for some yourself. And there was just activities to help children to just engage in prayer in new ways. So it's helping them to understand that they can draw, they can do actions, they can do activities, they can have space to stop and think. And that's all part of prayer if it's given to God, and you can talk to him about it. But it was important to give young people of faith, of no faith, and of different faiths a space to come and reflect.
We thought this was a great opportunity to actually open up the physical church building and just to fling open the doors and to enable all 350 kids and their teachers and actually some of their parents. We had an open afternoon for some of the parents to come down as well, but to open up the church building, to demystify what happens behind the bricks and the windows that you can't see through, and just to really be very creative, to let loose, if you like, in the basement of the church building and turn it into this prayer space. We then were able to have the opportunity to encourage some of our church family members, ranging from parents right through to senior citizens and young people, to get alongside and to come and share in some of the prayer space activities as well. So they had first-hand opportunities to get alongside young people, to listen to them well, to help them with the activities, and to talk to them when the opportunities arose about what the Bible says about prayer and what the Bible says about God loving them as well. So that was a real encouragement. So things like, P6 young fella running in front of the self-esteem mirror and sitting for about half an hour in front of this mirror, and for one of our volunteers from the church family to be able to sit and there were Bible verses right around the mirror and to be able to share with them that they are loved. The Bible says that they are special in God's sight, and just that encouragement, and sort of you could just see a smile coming on that particular young boy's face. So opportunities like that, very simple, very gentle, but I think deeply profound as well.
So I can hear from that there was a huge impact on the school, and probably an impact that we'll fully never appreciate or know, and we trust God with. But tell us a bit more about the impact not only in the school community, but I know on the wider Bangor community as well, because that triggered something else, didn't it?
It sure did. So it's been really fascinating. So after the first year of the prayer space, we were really humbled and amazed at how open the young folks were throughout the prayer space week. But we were really challenged by some of the things that they were sharing around maybe anxiety levels, things that were causing them to grow stressed or worried, maybe things that were happening at home or in the classroom as well. And so we were able to bring that to the Board of Governors meeting the following week and shared openly about what we had learnt. And that provoked a fairly deep conversation at that Governors meeting around the prayer space and the importance of that. But that also led into the wider theme of mindfulness. And really that began a conversation that ultimately worked itself out into the creation of a mindfulness space in the school building, where now children and young people are able to go, if they're finding things maybe slightly challenging, they can take time out and go and rest and be still in the mindfulness room. So that was a real encouragement. But then also 2 years ago as well, we had the opportunity after the prayer space, again, sharing feedback with the principal of the school. And that provoked a deeper conversation, not just with the principal of Candyboy Primary School, but also with the principal of Bangor Academy around mental health and well-being amongst our children and families, which then led on to the creation of a community grassroots movement called Bangor Cares, and the establishment of a Bangor Cares Week back in September 2019, which brought together primary, secondary schools, business community, local political groups, church families, a whole town initiative to try and encourage people to care better for one another whenever it comes to our mental health and well-being. And that movement, that grassroots movement, started from the prayer space and the conversations with those young people and the work that God was doing in that room. So God just blew our minds away, to be honest, and how something so small and yet so significant could come and envelop an entire town.
Yeah, just that how I've noticed actually through the prayer space, now having run for 3 years, every year prayer has become a very normal thing for those children. You know, year after year, they're much more excited to come and be a part of it. It doesn't seem like a weird thing anymore to come and be a part of the prayer room, to connect with the local church, and to think through some of these bigger things, you know, spaces to ask for forgiveness, spaces to say sorry and to forgive others. And it's just, there's a lightness now, especially I noticed in this third year just past there. You know, the first couple of years, as Mark said, they were carrying some big, heavy, weighty things, and we were aware of issues of mental health. But through what the prayer space has done, through what the school has done with the mindfulness room, and through the Bangor Cares movement, we just noticed that there is a lightness now to the things that the children are carrying, and it's all working together, and that's God in the middle of it, you know, working it all together for the better, the development of the children and of the young people, and to be able to care for them in that way. From a Scripture Union perspective, this one school saying yes to a prayer room and seeing it in action, seeing the benefit of it, has actually opened up much more opportunity to be able to deliver prayer rooms in other schools in the local area, and even in post-primary schools as well. And so it's great to have lots of churches now getting on board and being able to offer prayer rooms. And it's just being able to share some of those key stories and some of those key impacts as well, that has been able to grow prayer spaces across the whole North Down and Newtownards area, and hopefully wider as well across the whole country.
The challenge we have at the moment, as we reminisce on these stories, you know, and they bring tears to your eyes, actually. I mean, COVID is disrupting everything at the moment. And so, I mean, this time last year, we were preparing for the next prayer space in January time. We're not able to do that at the moment. And as a church family, we're now struggling to work out how we stay connected in a caring and prayerful way with the school family beside us. So we're that gentle and non-anxious presence at the school gate. We're trying to encourage the staff and dropping in food hampers with notes of encouragement to the staff. We're trying to see the kids and providing the online resources for them as well. But just simply because of COVID at the moment, it's going to be a real challenge to operate a similar kind of prayer space as we have done in the last 3 years. So what we're trying to wrestle with now, maybe Rachel, you can help, is what does this look like going forward in this kind of COVID world now?
Yeah, similarly, I've been thinking about this and not wanting to lose the momentum and the impact of year on year on year, just creating a space for young people. So I've been looking to prayer spaces in schools as an organisation and just seeing what they have been learning from other organisations and other churches across the whole of the United Kingdom and what they've been doing. They've made some great prayer spaces at home resources, which during lockdown were used by families, and churches have been encouraging families to do that. But again, there's those children and young people who families aren't connected in with church and for whom that won't be an option. And so we're thinking about how we could do prayer spaces differently. And so I'm working on some ideas like a prayer space in a box, where it's maybe just one or two activities, or 4 or 5 activities that don't require sharing resources, and it's something that the teachers could lead the class through with an introductory video from local churches, local church leaders, and those who would have been involved before. And it just keeps that connection, it keeps that rhythm, it keeps creating that space, which is so important for those children and young people to be able to think through some of those activities and to be able to look to God and to think about their own connection with Him and their own spiritual development.
Brilliant. Oh, so much good stuff there. Thank you so much for just sharing your wisdom and your experience. And I hope you don't mind me saying, if anyone wants to know more about Bangor Cares or about prayer spaces, they could get in touch with either of you. You can do that through us at SU if that's helpful. Or Emma Thompson, who is the Prayer Spaces in Schools Ireland kind of coordinator. So we'll drop her link into the comment section there. But thank you to you both for taking the time to share with us today, and for all you're doing. Know that we're praying with you and for you, and all that you continue to do in reaching our school communities. Thank you so much.
Educational. We've thought about the pastoral and spiritual threads of chaplaincy, and I'm sure you can already see how these overlap, as they will too with our next area, the educational thread. Now, of course, schools are professional environments, and one of their primary purposes is to educate. I'm sure you've already picked up on how some of the things we've talked about contain that educational aspect and can even link with other areas of the curriculum, particularly in primary schools, which often have more of a topic-based approach to learning. But what in particular can the voice of a chaplain or a church, Christian organisation or individual seeking to fulfil this thread of chaplaincy in a school bring to the educational thread? As experts in the Christian faith, or at least as people with something to say about it in this context of the public square, we can really effectively help to meet the needs of the curriculum, perhaps particularly within RE classes, but in many other aspects of school life too. There's a historical link between churches and schools in Northern Ireland, and alongside the role of bodies such as the TRC, the umbrella body that oversees church representation on the boards of governors and controls schools, chaplains are well placed to be a sensitive voice of Christian faith in schools, advocating for what that looks like and helping pupils and teachers to explore and navigate their response to it in appropriate ways as part of both their spiritual and general educational development. And as we do that, we need to make sure that what we offer is helpful, credible and professional, taking careful consideration of the unique context of a school and their educational expectations. In exploring this thread a little more with others, 2 words also bubble to the surface. Marginalised. Every child and young person has needs, but those who are at particular risk are often those who are on the margins. Those who, for various reasons, are at risk of educational disengagement or underachievement. As well as offering pastoral support, practical educational support is really valuable for those on the margins too, either one-to-one or as part of small groups, through the likes of homework clubs, extra class support, or even in really practical ways like providing school bags or iPads are the kinds of resources that some children and young people, maybe even some schools, simply don't have access to. And linked with that, programmes. Whether it be support within the outworking of RE, or things like reading programmes, enrichment programmes, social action programmes, programmes around relationships issues and so on. Some of which might even be within the realms of shared education opportunities. Depending on the context, these can also be really valuable assets to the school. A note of caution might be to ensure that a chaplaincy type role isn't completely filled up with programmes either though. We might not be able to deliver them all ourselves, but we can certainly help to facilitate them. Many great organisations out there who could help to make them happen in schools. Here at SU, we already offer and deliver RE programmes in schools, often alongside local churches, like our It's Your Move lessons for P7 pupils, preparing them for moving school, which went online this year for obvious reasons and were incredibly popular. Or our Key Stage 3 curriculum-based lessons on the life of Jesus, as well as new lessons being developed online. Or our resources for children and young people at schools for those with special educational needs. Our Training and Resources Department have also worked alongside staff for the past couple of years developing RE frameworks for both Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2, as we continually hear a desire for fresh resources for the effective teaching of RE in schools. So there's already lots of opportunities for you as a church already to get involved with or to speak into your local school with. Or perhaps you're well placed to offer something like a homework club. Let me introduce you to Mark Moorhead, currently our school's ministry manager, but formerly ran a homework club in the school local to his church.
The church that I was employed in was close to a local primary school, like a lot of churches. And as a children's worker, I wanted opportunities to connect with that school and to support the boys and girls who went there. One such opportunity arose through an English class that my church were running for people who had English as an additional language. One thing we discovered was that many of the people in that class who were parents were struggling with supporting their own children with their homework. And so that's where we came in. Each week we spent time with those parents and with their children and helped them help their children with things like comprehension or parts of speech. Now that little homework club grew into something bigger because we approached the school and offered our services to the school itself for a more general homework club meeting each Monday afternoon. The school enabled us to use a classroom within the school itself, which we weren't expecting. And each week we met with 25 to 30 pupils and helped them with parts of homework that they were finding difficult. Our aim was to show kindness to these children in Jesus' name. And our intention was that every child in that room would have at least some meaningful interaction with a Christian adult every time they came. For that reason, we usually brought 5 to 6 people to support 25 to 30 children. Now, our workforce was fairly varied. We had people doing their Duke of Ed, people who were parents whose own children were at after schools clubs, people who were grandparents who had helped their children and their children's children with homework over the years. Our resources were fairly simple. We brought along some Haribo, some juice, spare pencils, and worksheets for quick finishers. This homework club was simple, sustainable support for boys and girls and their parents. This homework club met every single week to help boys and girls with things that they found difficult. This homework club, I believe, demonstrated that the church is interested in the individual and with the things they find tricky. And more than that, the church is willing to help.
Witness. In reflecting back on those verses from John 10:10, ultimately our desire, of course, is to see children and young people flourish and know life in all its fullness through knowing and walking with Jesus. And in all we do within our role as Christians in schools, we want to continually carry that with us and bear witness to it. But of course, while it's entirely appropriate to seek to be open and transparent about who we are and the good news of Jesus that we seek to bring into the school context, we also need to be clear that we are not there to force our faith on others. We are present as carriers of God's good news, of course, but also as partners with the school in its educational task and a professional understanding of what is and isn't appropriate in that context. This is where training and accountability and support is so vital. So if you haven't been involved in schools or you'd like some support in helping to think that through a bit more, then do get in touch and we'd love to walk with you in that. Again, I'm sure you will have already picked up on this thread of witness throughout everything we've talked about already. But here's just a couple more areas within this thread to consider a little more deeply. Salt and light. Both salt and light have properties which affect the things around them. So it's no surprise that we as Christians often find ourselves referring to these words of Jesus when it comes to living out our witness in practical ways in all sorts of contexts. For some, it's becoming increasingly difficult to be a Christian within the school context, both as a pupil and as a teacher. Many teachers fear what they can or can't say, particularly when it comes to some of the more big issues of the day and their awareness of the context they're living in. In such cases, someone in a chaplaincy type role can have a vital role in helping teachers and pupils to navigate how to be salt and light and decide on appropriate courses of action or help to speak into school policy. And of course, alongside many others, we at SU seek to work alongside our 250 or so registered Scripture Union groups across Northern Ireland, with E3 workers and others providing resources, training and support. Again, without necessarily having to play a central role, someone in a chaplaincy type role can play a vital part in terms of background support and presence in this, as well as supporting the SU group to think through their missional core value and the outworking of this within their own school community and beyond. Community. Community partnerships beyond the walls of the school are looked for within the school inspectorate, and they can add so much to the life of a school. We'd like to think that churches are also still central parts of our communities, and of course, as we've already seen, have so much to offer in terms of serving, supporting and speaking into their local schools in really practical ways. If you caught our session on SU groups last month, you'll have heard Glenn giving some really good examples of this in schools within his area. And for those of you familiar with our E3 Schools project and what our E3 workers are doing in 10 areas across Northern Ireland, this is what the empowering part of E3 is really all about. Most school principals will welcome input from local churches, particularly through things like assemblies and involvement of boards of governors and so on. And yet there are so many ways that not only the church leader, but anyone from within a congregation can serve and support or speak into the context of schools. So here's a few stories from some of the E3 staff. But again, do get in touch with any of us if you'd like to hear more about possibilities. We have a whole workshop of ideas when it comes to how churches can serve, support and speak into their local school communities. Perhaps you could pick up on even just one idea to start with for your context.
Hi, my name's Sarah and I am an E3 schools worker for Scripture Union. Probably one of the most powerful examples I've ever seen of church partnership was 2 or 3 years ago in an area where we saw over 5 churches partnering together. And they partnered together to provide P7 pupils with one of the best tools we thought we could ever give them for year 8. And that was the Bible. And so we were able to hand out over 150 Bibles that had each and every pupil's name inscribed on the front. There was incredible joy in the room as myself and the churches we were partnering with handed out a Bible at the end of our RE lessons, one by one to each and every pupil. There was amazing conversation in the room as well. But this has to be one of the most powerful examples I've ever seen of exactly what the church can do whenever it works together.
A church arrived at their local school on the last day of term before the first lockdown in March. They brought with them care packages for each and every pupil, filled with activities, games and treats for them to enjoy. All of the staff, pupils and their families were really touched, especially on a day filled with so much emotion and uncertainty.
Well, I suppose I've seen the impact of the It's Your Move lessons from 2 different perspectives. First of all, from being a P7 teacher myself and now as an E3 schools worker. As a teacher, I saw the 3 lessons as the perfect way to complement our P7 transition programme. The lessons are interactive, they're fun, they're fast-paced, and children not only enjoy them, but gain so much advice and insight into the changes, choices, and challenges that their move to post-primary school may entail. And in the lessons, the children are shown how the Bible reveals a God who is interested in them, who promises to be with them, and who can be trusted as they do make this transition to post-primary education. And so the It's Your Move lessons are a great way for churches to be involved in serving their local schools. Churches have the opportunity to work alongside their local E3 schools worker to help deliver the programme. Many churches also sponsor the It's Your Move book that each child receives at the end of the lessons. And so church involvement in the It's Your Move programme is a really effective way to demonstrate to each P7 pupil and to each school that they want to support and pray for pupils as they make their transition to post-primary school.
Let me tell you about Garden Academy, a weekly school club set up by a Christian teacher in one of our special schools with the aim of equipping young people with life skills through gardening activities. Garden Academy connects with local churches. 2 volunteers, both retired, one an elder, the other involved in the women's group, come along and week by week share their skills and expertise with the young people. The church supports their endeavours through praying for the group and also through gifts such as hampers at Christmas or buying plants for the allotment. And week by week, one of the church youth workers or some of the SU staff plant a Bible seed in the epilogue after the gardening activities. All these things make a big difference to the school community and are a witness to the wider community as a whole.
So if we come back to where we started, hopefully you can see now how the threads of chaplaincy can work together and very much intertwine. In many ways, this isn't rocket science. And as we said at the start, we just wanted to help put some language and structure and intentionality around this concept of chaplaincy that will hopefully inspire us to think about it more deeply and dream big for what the future might hold within the opportunities that chaplaincy brings in schools.
Right, so having talked a lot about the theory of chaplaincy, and we've seen some examples along the way, I'm delighted now to be joined by three people with experience as actual school chaplains. So we've got Helen and Gerard as employed chaplains in an integrated school in Belfast, and Pete, who has experience of chaplaincy in a high school in Drumore. So many thanks to all of you for joining me for a wee chat online here. And maybe perhaps just to start with, you could just each tell us briefly how you came to be a school chaplain.
I kind of fell into it almost by chance. I had come from Scotland to Northern Ireland. I'd been working with a Christian community in Scotland and then for a church in Northern Ireland for a few years, and had done a PGCE and was looking through the paper for jobs. And I saw the chaplain's job at a school that I'd heard of because of its groundbreaking work in bringing Protestant and Catholic children together. This was 1992, so before the Good Friday Agreement. And I was encouraged to apply, even though I didn't think I was qualified, but ended up getting the job back in 1992.
I specifically became a chaplain in an integrated school, I think, based on my experiences. Having studied as a Catholic in Union Presbyterian College, and then going on to do cross-community youth work amongst churches, and then my teaching qualification for RE.
What about you, Pete?
I suppose my experience is a bit different in that I was working for a youth work organisation. We had a youth centre in the town, and we had an ongoing relationship with the school, but we're looking to develop that and how we could engage more. We ran a prayer space as part of our yearly programme, and our first prayer space threw up loads of issues and pastoral stuff that the school knew about, but probably really highlighted the scale. So it was a combination of they were exploring how they can increase their support for pupils, whilst we were also looking at how to engage more in the long-term life of our school. And it was just that relationship with the school, with the principal and with the staff team, that it was just a really good fit, that we were there. We knew lots of the pupils and they were looking for additional support. And then we kind of we piloted a chaplaincy initiative probably over like a term, and then didn't mess it up that much that they continued going. And then it's kind of continued ever since, from strength to strength, hopefully.
I could give you a rundown of a sort of a typical day, if there's such a thing. Helen and I would be in the morning normally for morning assemblies with a different year group each day, and the rest of our day would be kind of a mixture really of teaching. We do a little bit of teaching, about a third of our time is teaching, but then the chaplaincy time would be either people who've come with specific appointments, who've asked that they want to come and see us to speak about something of a pastoral nature, or a little bit of hanging about as well for people to drop in and see us. Sometimes something gets too much for somebody in class, and they get sent to us in the chaplaincy, or they run out of class and come to us in the chaplaincy sometimes. And there's a bit of liaison with the teacher around that. So we'll be using that time for planning. I guess it's planning with expected interruptions by students through the day, unless we have specific appointments made. And about 2 hours of our day is normally for drop-in breaks. The breaks and lunches are available, and we're there. We run a kind of a drop-in with games and things, and students know that we're there and we're free to talk to. Then there's other wee things that come in throughout the week. We'd normally have regular meetings with other staff, safeguarding meetings, and meetings about the ethos of the school, the integrated team. We do support for the prefects. We have a chaplaincy team of sixth formers who'll provide some support for students in different ways. So we'll work with them a couple of periods a week too. So nice wee variety through the week.
like presence is the big one for chaplaincy, that it is being present and having that presence in school and just being available. For us, that looked different during different seasons and looks different now that it did to look different last year. So we would have had a similar kind of stuff around lunchtimes. We would have been available and been around, and created that space for people just to, I think the biggest thing for chaplain is that to factor in just having time available where you can feel a bit of like you kind of float about or feel a bit of a spare part, but that's actually a real gift that you're there not with like a really busy schedule, but you're there for teachers, or sometimes it's just hanging around the staff room or the reception and you're just like chatting, is all equally as valid as the kind of program stuff that we would have had, from mentoring to like group work or taking classes, is that you're there as a presence. So the first one would be presence, and the second is authority. I think it's a real key ingredient for chaplaincy, and that's what distinguishes it from other roles that go into school, is that you move in the authority of the institution, and that as a chaplain, when you go into school, you carry the authority that God has given you and placed on you to move in and contribute to the positive ethos of school life. It really excites me, chaplaincy, and the opportunity and the like potential of it. Especially, I think it's needed now more than ever with pandemic and mental health, and a lot of our issues came from the change in family dynamic at home, or people's experiences with their parents, and behavioural issues. So we had a kind of strapline that we were pastorally proactive, spiritually reactive in school, and that could equally be flipped as much as well. So pastorally, you're there kind of fighting fires. You're mentoring with people who have behavioural issues, they can't get on with a teacher, or they have their home life is causing them stress, or self-esteem is an issue, and you're mentoring, or you're just catching up with them now and again. And that's one side of it. And then spiritually, that you're contributing to the spiritual ethos of school life. So for us, that might have been assemblies and the content that's going to be communicated throughout the year, or it's meeting with the senior leadership team and the board of governors about what is our Christian ethos as a school, and what are we communicating to pupils that we have that journey with us for 7 years or however long, and what are we communicating to parents when they come and meet with us, and how are we what adults are we sending out into the world, what values are they going to carry with them beyond the doors of their school life. So there's lots of these kind of conversations that go on.
Brilliant, thank you. Helen?
Yeah, I think on different levels, people appreciate having chaplaincy there. So like Pete was saying, when you're in the fabric of the school and people look to you, we're sometimes referred to, although we don't really like it, but because we think everybody is, but they refer to us sometimes as the guardians of the ethos. And so if something happens outside in society or globally, or something happens within the school community and people are looking for how to respond, the chaplaincy becomes the focus there, and we take a lead on our response to those things as a school community. But then on the level of the young people in the school, we're just so aware that the need is really high, with the recent surveys of showing how much young people are affected by anxiety and other mental health issues, that to have somewhere in school where they know someone is available, it's someone that they might have a relationship with over years, not just someone that they see for a short time, a safe space where they can go for peace and quiet if they want, or someone to talk to if that's what they need. I think that more and more, although teachers want to be able to respond to all these things, their workload is so heavy they're not always able to. So we can support the pastoral work that's going on in the school in a very different kind of way.
What the opportunity now in school life, in pandemic or post-pandemic life, is for supporting staff as well, is that teachers are so busy and everything is so much more stressful, and there are so many more measures. I think the real benefit of chaplaincy blessing school life is to support teachers and staff, and so a real strength is that I could have spent my time talking to a lunchtime supervisor, and then after lunch you'd have a meeting with the principal or one of the senior leadership, and the chaplain is free to move between all of those areas of school life, and that's all equally as valid as delivering a mentoring program or like a role of serving active worship in school life.
On a day-to-day level, I find I work 5 days a week and Helen works 3, and I do find it harder on the days when Helen's not in, whether that's because Helen does all the work, or whether it's because
Helen's just great.
yeah, she's nodding. So it could be. I think it's because some of the issues that we deal with are quite difficult issues, and sometimes there are things that you're thinking, is this as serious as I think it is, or is this do I need to speak to somebody about this, or you just need to run it by somebody, and having another person there is really helpful for that. In my first day or second day in the school, when I started my role, it was right when the kind of city hall flag protests were happening, and our students, the sixth form, the kind of prefect team, came to the chaplaincy and said, we are worried that this is causing some sort of ill feeling amongst students in school, or that's seeping into school life, and that can't happen in a school like this, and we need to stop this. So they spent a day working with me. I spent the day working with them. No, they worked with me to plan what they were going to do to respond to this. So they created an individual lesson plan that would be like kind of a discussion-based lesson that would collapse the RE periods for the day, and we would discuss this issue amongst the senior students. And they wrote a statement on behalf of the sixth form that got signed, and they went and spoke to the principal about what we could do, and they came up with all these different responses that they just said, I mean, they were kind of explaining to me on that day that if we have an issue like this, the chaplaincy is where we go with it. And to somebody who was new in the role and was trying to figure out what chaplaincy was, it just made so much sense. And I've always kind of held on to that story, because I find how I see chaplaincy, I think, of giving the students a voice to deal with issues of ethos and justice, and letting them take the lead in that.
Now to finish us off, if we're doing some blue sky thinking, if we're dreaming big for chaplaincy in schools in the future, let's do that. What could that look like if we look to the future? Gerard, what do you think?
Like, I think one of the things that's really important, and coming across from what Pete's saying as well, is that, you know, we think it would be great if there was chaplaincy in all schools, but it has to become part of the fabric of the school. It has to be, you know, it's not an outside thing that's parachuted in, which is sometimes a good starting point, but for it to become normal and accepted, and something that teachers especially and students value, and know what you're there for, and know how you can benefit the school.
For us in Dromore, when I was there, we went, I suppose the picture for me was like, this is the benefit. We've got young people and pupils here for like 5 or 7 years. It's like we've got this kind of captive audience, and if we get this right, we can really help them grow into quality adults that will go on to make a really positive impact in society. And so how do we support those pupils to get the best out of their time over those 5 or 7 years? And then we worked with the primary school, and it became like, imagine this one town, we had like 14 years of a young person's educational journey, and that would just be incredible opportunity.
And just to say, you know, it's our chaplaincy started with a dream, with a vision, and it happened. And you know, I think where people of faith are, you know, have a vision for that kind of support for people in school, you know, you can eventually achieve it too. built into the fabric of the place. I think there's something valuable about being there as chaplains, because students know that you see more to life than what is here and now, and that quite often students feel comfortable to lead into conversations with us that are about ethical or philosophical or spiritual things, because they know that we are open to discussing, you know, and open to hear the questions they have about spiritual issues as well. And that sets us apart a wee bit from perhaps some of the other support that comes into school.
Listen, we could chat all day. I could chat so much more. I just love hearing from your wisdom and your experience, all of you. But for now, thank you so much for being willing to share all of that with us. And we'll look forward to continuing to dream big dreams for the future and what God will do within chaplaincy and schools. But listen, thank you so much.
I wonder what you as a church, as an organisation, or simply as an interested Christian individual could think about more deeply coming out of this session today. I wonder which thread of chaplaincy you might be able to lean into, and where you might be able to work with and intertwine with others as we've thought about today. If you'd like to think through this a little bit more and chat it through with me a little bit more, please don't hesitate to get in touch. And if you want to be kept in the loop about follow-up conversations and developments, don't be afraid to fire me an email as well. Let me finish by reading those words from John 10:10 that we started with, which reflect Jesus' heart for people and our heart for the school communities that we seek to serve. Jesus said, "I have come that they might have life and have it to the full, have it abundantly." How amazing it would be to see those words across the walls of schools all across Northern Ireland.